where you're from and what your feelings are about teaching valuation, which is our main topic today. So we'd like to take a couple of minutes, and if you'd like to reply in the chat about who you are and your feelings about that topic, and we'll just kind of go from there. So we'll just take maybe 2 minutes. All right, opportunity to improve, that's great. Scary, that's a good one, yeah, definitely. Asking the right questions, that's a big important topic for sure. Oh, that's interesting. There's some folks that don't currently do evaluation, but kind of want to. That's good. It's important. Gets overlooked often. Yeah, there's so much going on these days. Even before COVID, there's a lot going on. There's even more now. So yeah, it's easy to overlook that for sure. It takes time. That's a big point. That's important. Getting value out of them if the students take time. Yeah, that's a big one too, is actually getting people to fill them out in a way that helps us. Okay, feels perfunctory, not getting valuable feedback. That's important too, because we put effort into getting feedback, and if it's not helpful, then that effort, that time is kind of not put to good use for us. So we'll take about 30 more seconds for a few more responses and then kind of move on from there. Needs to be integrated. Yep, that's good. Collaboration instead of judgments. Yeah, it can, I think it's easy to feel judged and kind of, it's a scary topic for sure. So collaboration, if we can kind of integrate that, is really good. Measuring what students learn. All right, thank you all so much for those great topics. I know some people mentioned, there were a lot of really good points there, but some people mentioned it can be scary, it can feel kind of overwhelming. And so that's one of the things that we found too, is that there's a lot of anxiety around teaching. And that's one of the things that inspired us to give this presentation, is teaching anxiety, because we know that many librarians experience anxiety around teaching. And in a recent survey on librarian teaching roles and attitudes, I think 64% of the respondents reported experiencing anxiety. And we've experienced it ourselves. So it's really something that we wanted to emphasize in this presentation. And this anxiety can bring up questions that we're kind of afraid to ask and try to answer, like, how is my instruction? Is it good enough? What do the students think of me? And we found that standard student evaluations may not provide really good information and suggestions to improve our teaching and answer these questions. So today we'd like to share 3 practices that our instructional literacy department engages in. So these practices can help us alleviate some of that anxiety. They can help us to solicit meaningful feedback, reflect on our classroom experiences, and also develop our identities as teachers. And those 3 practices are peer observation, verbal feedback, and participation in a professional learning community.
So we'll summarize what we do for each of these practices today, and then we're going to share what we've learned from them. Since our colleagues Rachel and Darren weren't able to join us today, we asked them to write some reflections for us about their experiences with these practices, and then we'll include those in, we plan to include those in our discussion too. So the first practice that we want to talk about today is peer observation of teaching. So this is a practice that we value because it provides an opportunity for both the observer and the teacher to learn from each other. So we've done peer observation a number of different ways over the years, but generally we follow this process. So we start out by making pairs. We've done this both formally, where we might assign a partner within our department or across departments in the library. And we've even partnered with librarians at another university to make the partners. We also do this informally, where a teacher might just ask a colleague that they trust to sit in on a lesson that they're struggling with and to provide some feedback on it. Um, Once we have the pairs set up, the pairs meet to discuss the class that the teacher wants observes, the outcomes of the lesson, and what the teacher wants the observer to focus on. We think it's really important for the teacher to lead this discussion and be able to control what the observation is going to focus on. After the class session, the pair meets again to discuss how the session went from the teacher's perspective and what the observer saw. And after this discussion, we swap roles. So the teacher becomes the observer and the observer becomes the teacher, and we repeat the process. When we do peer observation, we stress that the observer should not focus on evaluating the teacher or the session, and that the observation should never be used for tenure or promotion decision, and that the observation and discussion are strictly confidential and shouldn't be shared with anyone else, including the teacher's supervisor. So we found that for us, it's worked well to limit the observation to one per year. This gives us a little bit of flexibility for the teacher to pick a session that they actually want to have someone watch. And we found that it can be, even with doing it once a year, it can be challenging to schedule the peer observation. So we've tried to address this by video recording the sessions, but we found that this actually increased anxiety for many of our teachers, and that was not what we wanted to achieve. So we haven't repeated that. So this is what we do with peer observation. And then when we reflected on how peer observation has helped us to grow as teachers, this is what we found, what we learned. So Darren shared that it's helpful to see someone else teach, someone with a completely different teaching persona, classroom management style, approach to interacting with students. It can be easy to get stuck in doing the things the same way without questioning them, and observing other teachers can help shake that up and change my assumptions and habits. And I think that the feeling like we're getting stuck is probably one that many of us can relate to. Rachel shares that what I really appreciate about how we do peer observation is that it's non-evaluative. I can ask any of you to observe a class for a specific reason and not feel as though I'm being judged. Rather, I feel like I'm getting specific and thoughtful feedback from someone I trust. Peer observation has encouraged me to continuously consider my approach to the classroom. It helps me question why I make certain decisions and also work in the best interests of my students. For me personally, I've found that I learn a lot from sitting in the back of the room and observing what the students are doing during the session. So especially when I was a new teacher, the first time I observed a class, I was shocked to see that the students were paying attention. And I think that observation really had a profound impact on me as a teacher, and it helped transform my perspective from one of me versus a student to one of me and the students learning together. So the next practice that we wanted to talk about today is something called verbal feedback. This is something that we've done with our information literacy credit courses. So we do teach, have the opportunity to teach credit courses at our university. But this practice is one that we value because it provides an opportunity to hear from the students directly about what is working well and how we can better meet their needs. So this is how verbal feedback works. As the instructor, I prepare open-ended discussion questions about the course that I want students' feedback on. For example, I might ask students about what assignments and activities were most helpful in terms of their growth in the class. So I prepare these questions. Then on the last day of class, I arrange for one of my colleagues from the department to come in, and they use the questions that I've written to facilitate a discussion with the students while I leave the room. And we have the instructor leave the room to hopefully encourage the students to speak more freely and openly about the course. So during this discussion, my colleague who is facilitating will take notes on what the students are saying. And then after grades are submitted, the facilitator will share those notes with me. So this may sound just like your usual session evaluation, but what we found is that we tend to get more feedback from students this way, and that the feedback is often more specific than kind of the it was good or it was boring that doesn't give you a lot of information about what to change. So it's kind of like doing a focus group on your course. So the students agree with each other, they disagree with each other, they build off each other ideas, and we've got some really good feedback this way. So like I said, we do this in the context of credit courses, but I've been thinking about if and how a verbal feedback practice could be modified for one-shot sessions. And I think it would be interesting to try replacing like a written minute paper with a group discussion at the end of the class. Um, and you would probably have to facilitate the discussion yourself just for time reasons. So you'd have to think carefully about what question you wanted to ask. But I don't know, it could be interesting to see how that would go. So that is our verbal feedback process. And then I wanted to share just one reflection from Rachel on how it has helped her to grow as a teacher. So Rachel said that for me, verbal feedback has turned into a foundational component of my pedagogical approach. The idea of giving students a forum for open critique is so important to me as a teacher. It reflects the values I want to promote in the classroom, such as critical reflection and open communication. The verbal feedback students give can provide so much more insight into their actual learning than standardized course evaluations or even assessments. Something as simple as we didn't spend enough time talking about blank, or I didn't really understand the point of blank, gives me a sense of how students perceive course content after a bit of reflection.
All right. So the professional learning community is something our department has done for several years. Our group usually consists of 5 instructional librarians and myself. Like I said, I'm a library technician and graduate students. And so as a group, each semester we select a teaching related topic that we'd like to learn more about. And then we identify a book or a series of articles about that topic. So usually everyone reads the works and then we meet for group discussions, which we take turns leading. If the works are long, we might divide them up and have like each person present on a chapter or an individual article. The number of discussions varies throughout the year because we try to avoid the busy times of every semester, but generally it works out to 5 or 6 discussions over the course of a year. And so each discussion is about 2 hours in length. We usually meet off campus to kind of give ourselves a break from our work environments, but we continue doing this during COVID and we met on Zoom. So during each discussion, we'll summarize the work, try to relate it to our own experiences, and then consider how to incorporate it into our teaching. So we've used this process to explore a range of topics, including anti-racism, funds of knowledge, and culturally relevant and responsive pedagogies. So it's been really good for that. So there are many benefits to having this type of professional learning community. It does take time and effort to organize, but it's really been worthwhile for our departments. First off, it gives us an opportunity to discuss topics that weren't covered in school or that we're particularly interested in learning more about. As Brianne noted, like many librarians, I don't have a background in pedagogy. Participating in the professional learning community has allowed me space to engage with the theories and research on teaching and learning. Second, being committed to the meetings helps us make time in our schedules, which are usually very busy, for the reading and reflection. So as Darren stated, it's motivating to get reading done when I know we'll be discussing it together. And that certainly helps me as well. If I know I have to share with a group, I'm certainly more likely to get it finished. And third, and perhaps most importantly, it gives us tools to increase our confidence in our teaching. And this is really something that everyone mentioned as we were putting this presentation together. And I know for myself, the readings help me think about students more holistically. So especially about how their experiences affect their engagement with a class or an instruction module, and also about their learning and their success. And so Rachel noted about the learning community that it's helped me become a more informed educator, and our conversations have helped me to reflect on and critique my own practices. And Brianne also reflected that it helped open my perspective to experiences outside of my own narrow and privileged experience with higher education. And Darren also noted that the readings have really impacted every part of my teaching, how I interact with students, share power and decision-making with them, design course policies, give feedback on assignments, etc. So it's really been helpful in that aspect. So the professional learning community, along with the peer observation and verbal feedback, really give us a lot of useful information to improve our teaching and our engagement with students. But there are some important concerns to keep in mind with all three of these practices.
So first, we want to acknowledge that it can be really difficult to open yourself up to observation and student feedback, especially if you're already anxious about teaching. Engaging in these practices requires vulnerability, and it takes time to build the trust to make that possible amongst, to trust your colleagues enough to feel comfortable doing this. Furthermore, these practices are not immune to power dynamics in work relationships. So both position within the organization, for whether that's supervisor-supervisee relationships or tenured contingent or librarian versus staff, all of these may impact how a teacher experiences these practices, and the teacher's positionality based on their intersectional identities can further impact how a teacher is going to experience these practices. Even from my own privileged experiences as a white cis woman, I've had some less than great peer observation experiences when I was a new librarian being paired with more senior male colleagues. Finally, we know that bias is a problem in traditional student evaluations of instructors. So from the research, we know that women are rated lower than men, faculty of color are rated lower than their white colleagues, faculty with accents are evaluated more harshly than their white and native English speaking colleagues. And while there's not much research on other intersectional identities that may bias student evaluations, so like sexual orientation or disability, it's probably likely that all of this contributes to bias in student evaluations. And while there's not research on there specifically about student verbal feedback, we have no reason to think that this practice wouldn't be similarly biased. So for these reasons, we think it's really important that these practices be used for personal growth, professional development, and never for performance evaluation. So not linked to pay, promotion, job security, that sort of thing. And if you are looking to
warning.
If you are looking to implement these practices at your library, I'd suggest starting small and allowing folks to opt into participation. So though these practices are not perfect, and we are not perfect teachers, these practices have helped us to reframe evaluative questions about our teaching into questions that encourage self-reflection and help us to grow as teachers. So this is an ongoing process though, and there are definitely still questions that we don't know the answers to yet and may be afraid to ask. So for example, am I reaching all learners? Am I meeting the needs of the students whose identities differ from mine? What mistakes have I made as a teacher that I didn't realize at the time that one of these methods has made me aware of? And how do I avoid making the same mistake again? And how can I be more intentional and aware of the impact that I have in the power dynamics in the classroom and students' experiences of education? So there is still a lot that we don't know, but we feel that we are getting a little bit better at asking ourselves difficult questions and continuing to grow as teachers through these practices. So here are the couple of references that we used during that we referenced during the presentation, and our contact information. And that is all that we have for today. So thank you so much for listening to our presentation.
Thank you both. That was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quite a lot of discussion in the chat. If you have any questions for our presenters or for the LILi board, we will have a Q&A for everyone around 2 o'clock. So please stay tuned for that. Also, please stay tuned for our survey at the end of this conference, because if you fill out our nice little survey, you may get a little prize. So stay tuned for that. We're going to move on to our next presentation, improving GIF use in the classroom. So if Kelsey's on the floor, please.
Yeah, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Let me get a presentation pulled up here. All right, are y'all able to see that okay?
Yes.
All right, cool. So yeah, hey everyone, welcome to Improving GIF Use in the Classroom. My name is Kelsey Hammer, and I am the Digital Literacy and Multimedia Production Librarian at the University Libraries at Virginia Tech. I did just throw in the chat, there is a bit.ly short link for today's presentation. It'll show up again at the end because we're going to be moving pretty fast with just 10 minutes to talk. But that is LILiGIF, LILiGIF, and that's all uppercase and case sensitive if you want to get back to these resources or this talk at any point. So I love to talk about GIF use in the classroom, and today, in kind of the short time that we have, we're going to talk about one of the biggest questions that I get when I talk with folks and educators about GIFs in the classroom, and that is, how do I actually find and choose better GIFs for my teaching materials and my teaching experiences? And to get into that conversation, it might be good to start out with kind of the big question of sort of what is a GIF for folks who may not know. And just like the GIF I have up here on screen right now, it's sort of a old school radio, kind of visually playing music. GIFs are just short, animated, looping, silent images that are usually pretty small in file size. And they started out as sort of this niche, old school internet aesthetic type thing. They moved in the past couple of years into this sort of like pop culture phenomenon, and now they're just kind of old hat. A lot of folks use them pretty frequently in their digital and online communication. And because of that, we don't always think really strategically about how we use and choose GIFs, both in our personal lives and in the classroom. I also wanted to share sort of 3 things that I think are sort of fundamentally important about GIFs and kind of the power that they have. The first is that the way that GIFs capture emotion and motion make them really powerful because they're able to say things that words can't always say. They speak for us. So they're able to kind of capture things that we don't have words for. They're able to quickly share emotions that we might not have time to unpack with our students. And they also act as our bodies. So when we're in online and digital spaces, GIFs can be our voices, they can be our faces, they can be our bodies. And so they speak for us, which can be really powerful. They're also focal points. So anytime you have a GIF up behind you on a presentation, that is going to be the thing that folks look at. So they grab the visual attention, but they can also do things like center the emotions of a group of people or distill really complex ideas or emotions down into a single unit for everyone to jump into. And so they're focal points in that way. GIFs are also really, really fun, and fun can be a really important part of learning and the educational experience. And so when they're kind of paired with the right pedagogy and the right intention, they can be really powerful as fun objects as well. So for folks who may not have seen GIF use in the classroom or in academia, I did want to give a kind of a quick shout out to ways that GIFs are being used in the classroom. You're experiencing one of those right now. The most common way is kind of throwing GIFs into our Google Slides or our teaching presentations. But I've also seen them used in things like online modules and guides. So folks might show how to move within a database, or a lot of times if you're doing something with your hands. So a lot of times like cooking tutorials, or we make videos about some of our makerspace stuff and kind of show people how to put things together. They're also used in messaging platforms. So sometimes semester-long classes will have a shared Slack where students can communicate and collaborate. You might go into a one-shot with a Google Jamboard and have students kind of throw GIFs onto that. Also social media, where libraries and classes are sharing out what they're doing. I've seen folks have students send them reaction GIFs to how they feel about a certain assignment or prompt. And also student art is one of my favorites. This is from my time working at Carolina. We were having students kind of capture what life was like at Carolina using GIFs, both things they created and filmed. But yeah, so I want to jump into kind of the meat of what we're going to have time to talk about today, which is just how do I find better GIFs? This is a big question that I get from folks because it can be really hard to find GIFs that really say what you want to say. And folks often say to me, like, Kelsey, it seems like you find GIFs that you really like. It seems like, you find really cool stuff. What is your process for finding GIFs specifically for teaching? And so I sat down and I did sort of like a rough sketch of my process. Like, I don't pick GIFs with just my heart. I don't get stuck on one idea. I look a bunch of places. I, grab a bunch of things. Something that I've been trying to do more is to also double check accessibility and make sure that I use them correctly. And I was writing all of these things and thinking about all these things and sitting in my office, much like Kermit here, kind of looking around like, this sounds familiar to me. What is this thing? And I realized that what I was thinking about is just basic information search processing, the things that I use when I do research for my research, the things that I walk in and teach students about, things like Mike Caulfield's SIF method here. But what I was realizing is that often as educators, we use this kind of system, we use this process when it comes to research, we teach this process. But when we choose media for our educational materials, whether they're GIFs or icons or pictures or anything, we don't always use this process for those types of things. We don't translate that process. And so what I did was kind of put together a method for doing that. So what would it look like if we took the information searching strategies that we know, maybe love and use very frequently, and then actually kind of translated or use those for media, in this case, GIFs. And so I came up with the GIF searching method, and we'll go through each of these steps. And hopefully that will also give you some strategies for thinking about how you use and choose GIFs in your life and in the classroom. So the first of these things is to pause our emotions. Just like when we talk with students about, if you open up a news article, you might need to pause. We don't want to totally jettison our emotions, but they're important, they're important to have, but they can also kind of blind us to other things about something. And so the first GIF that you see that resonates with you isn't always necessarily the best GIF for your use case. So a lot of times you're going to open up a GIF database and see something that makes you laugh, or something you relate to, or something from a show that you like. But you've got to pause that emotion and hold on to that for later. The second thing here is to loosen our scope. We talk a lot with students about narrowing or broadening their topics, and that it can be really hard if you go into a search with a really specific idea of something that you want. And sometimes exploring past your initial idea can be really fruitful. This is particularly helpful because GIF culture is weird. Sometimes there's no GIF for something that you think there would be, and sometimes there's completely weird corners of things. One of my favorites is on Twitter. There are the top 20 GIF categories, and they're like the range of human emotions, sadness, happiness, all of these things. And then there's popcorn. Popcorn is an emotion, and that's just kind of like excitedly eating popcorn while someone gives you gossip. And so there are thousands of GIFs for that. And so maybe by loosening your scope, you might find a cool new corner that you'd never heard of before. We also, of course, the big thing is to expand our strategies. This is where kind of the meat of all of this is, which is that you don't just want to search in one place. You want to look past the first page of results and also use multiple keywords. This is really important because in GIF culture, a lot of GIFs are organized by community tagging, and they're stored in databases that aren't super sophisticated when it comes to searching algorithms. And so it's really important to try and take your idea and distill it down into single terms and like simple ideas. So for example, if you were teaching about research, you might look up research as a keyword, but also, pencil, laptop, student, teacher, classroom, school, and really distill it down, and you're going to be able to find a lot more. You can also follow those hashtags that are attributed with a GIF, just like you would follow citations in a database.
Kelsey, 3-minute warning.
3 minutes. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and if in case folks don't know, on Google, you can actually search just for like GIF type in the advanced search settings. And that can be a great way to search multiple GIF databases at one time. And something that I like to do is a lot of times we grab one GIF for one use case, but it's really helpful to actually grab a couple. So I usually grab 4 or 5 GIFs for a use case, and then I save what I don't use for later. So in a second here, we're going to test our GIFs. And so kind of grab a couple, save what you don't use, that'll save you time. And that is going to help you kind of think about your scope a little bit more. And like I said, it's really important to test. So I usually come in with 4 or 5 GIFs for a use case, and then I do some tests. The first of which is to try and check my bias. There's some racial bias stuff that's important to think about. We want to make sure that the GIFs that we're using in our teaching are representative, but also there's a real problem with digital blackface in GIF culture. So making sure that you're not perpetrating stereotypes. Also cultural bias, making sure that you don't assume what kind of media people are into, and also kind of generational differences as well. Folks might not be into a certain thing just because it's what you think they might be into. Also checking the visual quality, the context, making sure that it's not a GIF from like a white supremacist YouTube channel or something. You'd be surprised. So I always try and check the tags or do a reverse image search to make sure I generally have an idea of where it came from. and also just to check those emotions and vibes. A lot of times, if you watch a GIF one time through, you'll get one vibe from it. But if you watch it a couple more loops, you might pick up on something else, a sort of undercurrent. And so that can be helpful to double check as well. And lastly here, I just try and make sure to support my audience, make sure that I'm not using the GIF in a way that's going to be distracting. And also accessibility, providing alt text or audio description, avoiding strobing or flashing, and overstimulation for those with cognitive disabilities. And yeah, so hopefully, this has been kind of a quick look at some strategies that could help you think about how you might choose media, particularly GIFs, for your presentations and other types of teaching. But yeah, I would love to talk more with folks about GIFs, including going beyond and creating your own GIFs if you can't find them. There's so much to talk about with GIF culture and teaching, but hopefully this will get you started thinking about GIFs in the classroom. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kelsey. That was amazing. I think now, I hope everyone has some amazing questions to save for us. Also, take a look at the chat. It's been incredibly amusing. I love it. Is it GIF or GIF? Who knows? Now, I think it's time for some updates. Liz, is this Liz? Go for it, Liz.
Thank you. I'm just pulling up my, oh no, Eva's got the slides. Thank you, Eva. Yeah, so hi everybody. I'm feeling super inspired and excited after seeing all these awesome presentations. I hope you are too. Before we let you go for our food break, just a couple quick updates. So our nominations committee sent out a request for nominations for the coming year a couple weeks ago. Thank you so much, nominations committee. And we've got a couple positions still open. So one of those is the web committee chair, and the other one is an advisory board member. And we're specifically looking for a library or iSchool student representative. So if either of those sound interesting, or if you have questions, please reach out to Claire LaPolte. Her email is on this slide, as you can see. And just to plug LILi a little bit, it's a great group. It's super collaborative, super friendly, and you'll meet tons of cool people. So it's a great way to get involved in conference planning and leadership. So yeah, reach out if that sounds interesting. Let me see. And oh yes, and you can also let Esther know your interest. Esther or Claire, I believe, would be happy to answer questions. So go ahead and grab some food, grab some water. And if you want to, during the break, you can also browse our posters. I'm going to put the link for that in the chat. And we'll meet back here at 12:30, I believe. So does anybody else have anything to add? Am I forgetting anything? No? Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you at 12:30. Enjoy your food break. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. As folks are coming back from the food break, we'll give folks a couple minutes probably to come back. So let us know if you need anything. And in a couple minutes, we'll jump to our wonderful poster presenters. I got to unmute myself, sorry. For those joining us, welcome back. We're just waiting maybe one more minute, and then we'll jump into our wonderful poster presentations. All right, what do you think? Should we go ahead and get started if folks are ready? Yeah, okay. So yeah, like I said, we're going to be jumping into our poster presentations. Each person has, or each group, excuse me, has 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning at the end of your presentation. Yeah, let us know if you have any questions or need any assistance. And first up, we have April Shepard, who's going to be presenting on creating inclusive information literacy classrooms. So go ahead and share your screen if you would like, April.
Well, I was just going to talk about my poster, if that's okay, because it's longer than 5 minutes to go through it all.
Absolutely, sure.
Hello, so my name is April Shepard. I am the Assistant Library Director, and I'm also an instruction librarian at Arkansas State University. I've been doing information literacy instruction for about 15 years, and I do a variety of formats, including BIs and for-credit instruction. I'm also an advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am a member of my university's Diversity Affirmative Action Committee, and I'm also on the Action Council for ALA Social Responsibilities Roundtable. So as you can see, information literacy, DEI, both very important to me. So this is why my poster is on creative, inclusive information literacy classrooms. And in my experience, for a lot of college students, that first time they have that information literacy instruction, especially if you're going into the classroom, that's the first time they have any interaction with the library or a librarian. So that first response could be what makes or breaks that student as a library user. You know, if it goes bad, they may never use the library. If it goes great, you may have a returning user. So it's very important that we're inclusive, that we make everyone feel welcome. And more importantly, I firmly believe that libraries should not be neutral. We should not be neutral spaces. We should be constantly advocating and promoting diversity, inclusion, and equity. And this includes through actions such as creating these inclusive spaces. So my poster is just to help you begin. It's 7 steps. It's not everything. I think if I had an hour and a half, I couldn't cover everything, but just to get you started. And the first step's the hardest step, right? You have to identify and understand your personal biases. And this is really hard to do. No one wants to be biased. I hope not. I definitely don't want to be biased, but I am. And unfortunately, you all are too. But understand how that works, understand what your biases are and test them. And once you have that understanding, you can start to overcome them. And the second, you want to always try to use inclusive language. So this is any language, well, that's not exclusive. So you got to do it by excluding the exclusive language. An exclusive language is anything that marginalizes people who've already been marginalized, like LGBTQ, people with disabilities, people of color, minorities, gender language. There's a whole host of them. So try to make sure that the language that you're using is as neutral as possible. Third, you want to avoid digital blackface. And digital blackface, if you're not familiar with this term, is the use of images and GIFs of African Americans by non-Africans to convey emotions, but they're usually funny, haha, but they're kind of mean a lot of times. They tend to make fun of the person that's in the photo, and they also tend to reinforce negative stereotypes of African Americans. You should have images of diverse people in your classroom, but there's a line that gets crossed when you're using that person and you're making fun of them. So you got to be careful about that. Fourth is to use universal examples. The analogies and idioms that you use in your classroom should be understood by anyone. And it's not an international student problem. Even if you have no international students in your class, you still want to be as level as possible. When I moved to Arkansas, my biggest barrier was actually language. And I only live about 8 hours where I grew up, but that 8 hours just in culture and language made such a difference. I had a problem when I moved here. Fifth, you want to create for everyone. Ensure that you're providing accessible documents. And anytime you have things like videos or things like tutorials, you want to make sure you have alternative formats. And again, this isn't just for one group of students. You want to make sure that you're creating for everyone. And we get a little hung up in creating for students with disabilities. That's important.
1 minute warning, sorry.
But there's lots of reasons why, you know, so where I live, a lot of students don't have access to high-speed internet. Like it just doesn't exist where they live. Or my sister had 7 kids at home all on the internet at once with virtual school. So you got to be careful. 6, be an advocate. A lot of your students are not going to speak up for themselves. Speak up for them. Also know what resources are available at your institution. And then finally, take ownership when you do make mistakes. You're human, I'm human, we're going to mess up. Take ownership, apologize, learn from it, and it's going to make you a better instructor. So there you go, my 7 steps.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic and so many important points. So let me see. So just a reminder, which I also said in the chat, we're saving the Q&A for the end. So make note of your awesome questions for later. And next up, we have Michelle Kebeknecht presenting on curiosity as a catalyst for teaching ourselves and others.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted and sharing my screen. Can you hear me?
Yes, you look great.
Perfect. All right, so today I'm going to be presenting some results from an exploratory mixed method study that I did. Obviously, this is a very short amount of time and this is a pretty large study, so I'll just give you a very broad overview. I do have an article under review, so hopefully there will be an article published soon, or you're welcome to reach out to me with any questions that you have. So my name is Michelle Kiva Connect. I'm the senior medical librarian at the Charles E. Schmidt College of Medicine at Florida Atlantic University. And I want to start off by giving you a little bit of background about this research study. It started through the Institute for Research Design and Librarianship, which I highly recommend if you're interested in doing research. It's a great institute to learn more about the process. And really what I was trying to do was to explore the relationship between non-traditional undergraduate students' curiosity and their experiences researching a topic. So I specifically focused in on a type of curiosity called epistemic curiosity, because epistemic curiosity focuses on the desire for knowledge that motivates individuals to learn new ideas, eliminate information gaps, and solve intellectual problems. So there's other types of curiosity, but to me, this was the one that focused in the most to information literacy and what we do in the library. Epistemic curiosity has been studied in psychology, but curiosity studies within the field of information literacy are pretty limited. When I did my literature review, it was unclear to me whether it was a good thing, if it made students more motivated to research at a deeper level, or if it was actually a negative thing. There were articles about negative feelings of confusion, frustration, and doubt when researching. And if you research something that you already know the answer to, it's much easier and you don't have to fight those feelings of confusion, frustration, and doubt. So that's kind of the question that I had and some research that I did at the beginning to see where to go with the project. So after getting approval from my institution's review board, I surveyed non-traditional undergraduate students in a required academic research techniques course at the university that I was at. I had 59 participants, which was a 97% response rate. And what I did was after they received information literacy instruction, not from me, from another librarian, so that I wouldn't bias them, the students took a survey comprised of demographic questions, something called the Epistemic Curiosity Questionnaire, which measures epistemic curiosity as a trait, and something called the Information Literacy Self-Efficacy Scale, which measures information literacy self-efficacy. 24 of the 59 students also elected to participate in an in-depth interview with me so that I could also get some qualitative data and get kind of the why of what they were experiencing and what they were feeling. And then finally, I collected their students, their culminating project, which was an annotated bibliography on a research topic of their choice. And I evaluated them using the AAC&U information literacy value rubric. So I wanted to see what they thought about it, how they scored as compared on an actual project, and how they scored as compared to their self-efficacy or how they felt about their information literacy skills. So I kind of got data from 3 different points. So for the results, because it was a mixed method study, it was divided into qualitative and quantitative results. I transcribed the 24 in-depth interviews and identified key themes through the use of applied thematic analysis. And the 3 major themes that I identified were personal connection, digging deeper, and professor guidance. Almost all of the students talked about having a personal connection to their topic. And there was some variation. For some of them, it was a vocational connection. They wanted to research something that they were interested in career-wise. Other people had a personal connection due to a family member. But there was something that drew them to it and made them feel personally connected. And then once they were personally connected, they talked about digging deeper. They talked about losing track of time and just researching and getting really lost in it. But the key finding here that I found was that professor guidance was key. They needed feedback from their professor to really help them hone their topics into a researchable thesis. So that was what mitigated those feelings of nervousness or doubt or confusion, having that professor feedback.
1 minute warning. Okay,
I'm going to gloss over the statistics, but you can review them here. The basics with the statistical analysis is that I did not find a statistically significant difference for their epistemic curiosity as compared to their rubric scores, but I did find a correlation between epistemic curiosity and the information literacy self-efficacy, about 18% variation for interest type epistemic curiosity and about 17% for deprivation type. So in conclusion, having a personal connection to a research topic is great, but I really think that professors and librarians need to have ongoing feedback and guidance to the students so they don't feel lost and doubtful. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That's fascinating. I can't wait to read more about it. I'm sure everybody else feels that way too. That's fantastic.
Hopefully soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next, moving right along. Next up, we have Logan Rath, who's going to be presenting on viewing information literacy as social practice.
Okay, we should be good. You should see my screen now. I am gonna bust through this quickly, for lack of a better term, because this was a full study I did and 5 minutes is not enough, but I didn't want to undersell it with the poster. So everything you need is there and you can always contact me after. So I started with a research question here about what are academic instruction librarians' beliefs of information literacy as a social practice as opposed to a set of autonomous skills. This came out of literacy coursework I did for my doctoral degree that I'm pursuing at the University of Buffalo. And I started noticing and reading from the literacy literature that literacy is not seen as something that one ever attains. It's a spectrum and you're always working to improve your literate abilities. There's a bunch of relevant literature here. You're all librarians or library people. You can find this on your own. We're just going to skip right over that. One of the things I came across in the information literacy literature was the idea of information landscapes. And this is from Anne-Marie Lloyd. And the idea is they use the physical landscape to describe the information environment, or of the analogy. And this really struck a chord with me and helped me understand why transfer doesn't always occur when we get our students in our lower level classes in college, and then we have to take them and we get them in their major. And there's just this big disconnect that's happening. You know, whatever they learned for English composition, I work with social work students and education students, it's just not there. And so at first I would get like frustrated with this, and I started to hear some colleagues talk about a deficit that the students have. Well, they should get this. Students should be able to. Lots of should and must thinking going on. And I said, and then I started thinking about this literacy stuff and said, well, that's a little different. So what if we actually investigate these information landscapes and think about, it's not that they don't get it, it's that they don't know this new landscape yet. So I put together a study. The study had a questionnaire that went out. People here may have taken it. And it asked participants to just give definitions and the relevance of literacy and multiliteracies to their job as a librarian. There was also the ability for people to say, yes, I'll participate in an interview. 46 people said, yes, you can contact me. And 17 of them actually responded when I contacted everyone. So there's a 37% response there. Transcribed all of the interviews and went through and analyzed them. Here's the layout of the participants and how they felt. I found that there was a split between a practice-based view and a skills-based view of information literacy. So skills, very short, usually just that they can do X. Practice-based is more nuanced. And you can see Francine and Phoebe's definitions there. Those are pseudonyms. Every respondent could make a connection between the idea that literacy is a social practice, meaning that it can't be separated from the people. Everyone could say that that was good. And then we talked about information landscapes. Interestingly, no one knew about Anne-Marie Lloyd's work. So go forth and read up on it because it's fascinating. Most participants said that, yes, this works for the information literacy classroom. One said it didn't. One didn't like the language. They preferred ecology over landscape, something like that. And there's just a couple quotes here that really helped talk about transfer and shunning the deficit perspective. Joanne here says that she would say to her students, I apologize on behalf of this crappy thing that you're trying to use to get the stuff you need. But in the meantime, here's how to navigate through this resource that you didn't know, because why would you know? Average humans wouldn't know. And that was really great to hear. And then Colette, another librarian, said, but I know our students come in and they don't know what they don't know. And so I was able to analyze this, and I actually developed a whole theory that viewing information literacy this way is a threshold concept that we as librarians have to go through. I'm working on some publications about that. And hopefully they'll be out soon. And I'm doing a dissertation study to sort of refine that threshold concept. So if you see that come across listservs, I'll be recruiting participants in the next month. But some main takeaways: librarians could learn from the field of literacy. It really seemed like there was this giant silo effect going on, that the librarians are not looking at literacy at large, and that Lloyd's work should really be used. And it can be really helpful to start thinking about things in another way. Because I haven't been given my 1 minute warning left, I do want to talk about, well, here are all the references. I'll leave those up while I talk. I do want to talk about the difference between a social view of information literacy and critical information literacy. Critical information literacy typically involves like using information to disrupt a power structure of some kind. And social views of information literacy, it's related, but it doesn't get into the upsetting the power dynamic piece. It simply asks that you acknowledge the social constructed nature of information. And it helps us understand that each landscape has its own group of people behind it that help explain how it was created, and they sort of set the rules for how it was created. And it's our job as librarians to sort of apprentice our students into the landscapes. And we do that in partnership with the professors. Okay. So that is the quick overview of the really complicated study.
Thank you so much, Logan. I'm really excited to go check out Lloyd's work and learn more about this. Yeah, you've given us a lot to think about with this one. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, finally, for our poster presentations, we have a group of folks presenting on the Nimble Association, Collaborative Teaching and Learning in SLA.
Hi, thank you. I'm Tara Grove. I am a librarian at Penn State and 2021 president of SLA, the Special Libraries Association. And we were trying to kind of give all four of us a chance to speak within this 5 minutes. So I will move quickly. But I do want to say I'm so glad that we got to follow Logan's presentation, because that idea of literacy as a social practice is also kind of what we're going to talk about here. So in case you're not familiar with SLA, it is an international association of specialized librarians and information centers. Our members' work and their work environments vary quite a bit and are often not fully addressed by what's in the literature on primarily public school and academic libraries. So therefore, it's very important that we can learn from each other. And so SLA works to facilitate members learning together. And this approach has been really especially useful on emerging issues where there is not yet an established set of best practices. So in this presentation, we are going to share two initiatives from 2020 and ongoing that demonstrate this concept in action. And I will turn it over to Emma Antipam and Taguchi.
Thanks so much, Tara. And thanks to Tara for bringing us all together so we can discuss some of the work that we're doing. The diversity, inclusion, community, equity community with SLA developed a reading group. My colleague, Tom Nielsen, approached me about wanting to provide this kind of important discussion on as a follow-up to the protests that were going on in 2020 and that continue, as well as bringing attention to the ways that librarianship perpetuate a lot of the racism that we find in the profession, and a lot of the other the negative experiences that BIPOC librarians tend to experience. And so we decided to work on starting with a conversation to bring this awareness to SLA members as well as ourselves. And so the articles that we choose, we make sure that they focus on a topic on equity, diversity, and inclusion. They are easily accessible, so anyone can access them online in full. We keep the conversations virtual, so this allows us to speak with SLA members who are not only in the New York area, but also nationally as well and internationally. We also always have clear discussion guidelines because we don't want this to just be a book talk or something where we just come together and talk and go about our business. We have clear discussion guidelines where we want everyone to participate as well as take actionable steps that they can bring to their community in SLA, or they can bring to their institution, or they can bring to their own work as professionals in what they do. We always want to refocus our topic when we discuss it to how can what we discuss improve SLA as an association. So we always try to bring it back to implications for the association and things that the association can do. And our reading selections always try to incorporate scholarship from authors that represent marginalized communities.
I'm sorry, 1 minute warning.
Okay, so I presume you can hear me. I'm Seema. I'm coming from Devon in London, England at the moment. I'm having a mini break. I work at a British Library. I was president of SLA Europe last year when Tara Marie Grove asked me to chair the task force on reopening specialized library as a reaction to the pandemic. It was something that was totally necessary at the time to encourage global collaboration for the issues that we were facing with regards to a pandemic. Obviously, we have communities and users and physical spaces as well, virtual spaces that needed support and help. And a lot of that conversation and trashing out the issues that we were facing, as well as the solutions and the opportunities that were there, were discussed in virtual roundtables. As you know, SLA membership is about 4,000 and plus, I think, across the world, but we actually had pockets of people participating in a task force that was ranging from Canada to India with the Asian chapter, as well as Europe and other members in the United States and North America. So we got lots of ideas on how this global pandemic was affecting our spaces and profession. We came together and came up with solutions. We wrote a report that was presented to the board. We came up with resources and guidelines, as well as not just one roundtable, but 4 roundtables that helped to give our community and our membership and other information professionals ideas about this. Some of the findings were also presented at the SLA conference in summer last year. And we are there to share practices. So we also tapped onto new research that was available from projects such as the Realm projects and other things that were coming out of our own experiences, such as myself at the British Library, when I physically went back to the library after the first wave of the pandemic here in the UK. I also saw physical things and also learned my own experiences that were shared with the whole membership, as well as the task force and our wider community. So it was very much a learning experience, and that also synergized with our crisis preparedness and workplace preparedness council. And we're still in a pandemic now, and we're trying to learn from those experiences and share it with our wider community at SLA as a global organization for information professionals and specialized libraries. Thank you.
I promise to be super fast, Liz. Is that all right?
We have extra time, so yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to briefly summarize. So SLA's DICE reading group and the task force on reopening specialized libraries provides opportunities for members to work collaboratively to address professional challenges and establish best practices, keep their own critical thinking skills sharp, learn from colleagues in diverse types of libraries around the globe, and create a deep and supportive network of colleagues. And we look forward to your questions, and thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Let me see. So we have a little extra time. I don't know if folks would like to ask our presenters some questions, or if the folks who presented their posters have anything else to add. How are folks feeling? What would you like to do at this point?
Are there any questions? I like answering questions.
I'm not sure if there's any questions for me, but I probably won't be able to stay until the Q&A at the end of the conference with the East Coast time change. So if anybody does have any questions, happy to answer now.
This is Zoya Falibai from BYU. I have a question for Logan. Logan, so with the different landscapes, do you say then that the library should be that main landscape, like the common landscape to bring everybody together?
Hi all, sorry. So Logan actually had to step out. I apologize before you started your question. So I'm sorry.
Anybody else could answer.
Yeah, if you could put that in the chat, I'll make sure that he receives it. Sorry about that. But yes, I believe everyone else is still present if you have any other poster questions.
I guess I have a question for Michelle, I think. Aside from the sort of professor assistance along the way, were there any kind of ways of sparking or encouraging that initial interest and curiosity? You did mention that a personal connection to the project is good. We do a lot of that at my school with like identity research, but any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. In this particular class, luckily, the entire class was dedicated to academic research techniques and researching. So the professor had time to do brainstorming activities. And one thing they did that they mentioned was she had them just look at local news or even BBC, whatever news source they like to use, and have that help them generate ideas. So sometimes they chose personal connection topics that related to the news, but they had a personal connection with that way. They weren't required to do that, but that was one strategy she had. And then I put a link in the chat to the article that inspired me, which was published in the library at the Lead Pipe. And Hannah and Anne Marie have really good strategies in there as well. And I really liked one they had where they looked at press releases from their university and kind of created a Google map that showed those press releases to make it kind of visual. And then that way it gave ways or like ideas to spark the students' curiosity that actually could be researched, because sometimes they'll want to research something that can't be researched, and that can have that frustration. So it's almost like they pre-curated topics that were relevant to the university. I thought that was a really good strategy they had too. So definitely check out that article for more of like the application. They took it beyond just the research and like how can you apply it in the classroom, which is great.
Do folks have any more questions? Feel free to speak up or put them in the chat, whatever's more comfortable.
I have a question for April. I missed a little bit of that presentation, but I'm interested in how, and I guess it's could go to everyone too if you just want to throw answers in the chat, but just because you looked at, using gendered language, evaluating your information sources, and all your different steps. Could you maybe, could we as librarians also talk about how things are maybe classified, like metadata and ways that things are tagged that may affect how students research and may affect our own biases in the classroom too. I ask because, yeah, CritCat, thank you for bringing that up. Because I'm working on a project right now that's looking at combating bias in metadata. There's actually an article coming out in September in ITAL that I'm co-authoring with Julie Hardesty from Indiana University. And, I'm just kind of wondering, we see all of these great things coming from catalogs and from metadata, but can we maybe make them more actionable in our teaching and in our one-on-one sessions with students? Are there ways to sort of bring it into the, not real world, but sort of person-to-person sphere?
Well, this is my personal experience when I teach, especially my 4-credit instruction. We talk about the age of call numbers and, that this is Library of Congress is, over 100 years old, Dewey's 100 years old, and that they do have problems in it. And that's part of our conversation when we talk about subject searching and things like that. And we talk about the language, and we talk about how language changes through time. So we do a lot of searching, and I have ProQuest Central has historical newspapers, so we do different subject searchings so my students can see how language has changed through the times and stuff like that. So we talk about that because I want my students to be aware. My preference would be that they would all be corrected in the catalog, and we can get the Library of Congress to fix some of these problematic subject headings, but that's beyond my control. So we have those conversations in class. And depending on the one-shot BIs, those freshman classes, we don't go that in depth. It's just an intro to the library. But with my graduate students and my specialized classes, we do talk about the language and the subject headings and the biases that are kind of into it. And yeah, I agree, doing local changes to your catalog. I fully support that too. Did that help?
I see, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize, April. If anybody had more to say on that topic, no. I see Emma has her hand up as well. Go ahead, Emma. And then maybe after this, we'll move on to the next section, if that sounds good.
Thanks, Liz. My question is for April, so back to April. I love that in your poster you included not just negativity bias, but also confirmation bias. And I understand that you're able to incorporate that into the instruction classes that you do for the higher level students. I am, where I work, I'm not always sure how I can incorporate that fully into the classes that I do, because sometimes I find I'm teaching to the assignment, and sometimes I find I'm very restricted with the assignment. So sometimes if it's an assignment on that covers like social justice or anything under that umbrella, I can then kind of discuss issues of bias and whether it's in algorithms, whether it's in our minds, whether it's the implicit bias that we have. So I'm able to do that with some classes, but sometimes if it's like an English class where it's a topic that is very specific to English Lit and not, just a general topic where the professor can say, you can research anything, because we do have those English classes, but some other English classes, it's just straight English Lit. But that's just an example. Sometimes I find what the assignment is restricts me from being able to include it in the way that I would want to. And so I wonder, do you encounter those challenges? I know you've been doing this for a long time, but do you ever encounter those challenges still? How do you get around that? Do you speak to the professor about wanting to include, topics of bias into the work, even if it's not germane to that specific assignment?
I do. I think when you work in information literacy, I mean, in a way, it is a service. So you are reactive to what the need is. And I've had classes, unfortunately, where they just want you to come in, say you're from the library, and they push you out the door. It's really hard to do that. And then sometimes you can get more in depth. And then I have some faculty members I have really good relationships for, and they bring me in just for those conversations because I get known as being that librarian. But in the times where I don't, where I'm teaching to an assignment, I still try to break down barriers. First of all, I got my blue hair, I'm tattooed, I got some piercings. So right there, I'm trying to break that stereotype of a librarian. And then I like to do example searches, to show how to use the catalog, to use how the discovery services. I'm pretty good about thinking outside the box. So I try to pick something that's in the topic, but not what they normally would think of, so African-American music is not automatically going to be blues or rap. We're going to do something different. So even then, if we're not quite discussing the bias, I still try to challenge those notions, even if I don't have a platform at that moment to do it. But it really varies.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to our wonderful poster presenters. Yeah, we really appreciate you coming here and sharing with us. So let me see. Yeah, round of applause for our poster presenters. Let me see. So if our next group of folks are ready, we could go ahead and move to their presentations. So I believe the first group is presenting on improving campus-wide instruction through a faculty-centered information literacy toolkit. Are Becky DiMartini and Zoya Falevi and Stephanie Robertson ready to go?
We are ready.
Awesome.
Can you hear me? This is
Yes.
Zoya. Okay, great.
Welcome. Hello. And I'll give you a 5-minute heads up at the end, if that's okay.
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Becky, are you ready? Becky was having a little bit of technical issues, so if not, we can just fill in for her and she can chime in. She's here. Okay, well, I'll get us started. We are from BYU, Hawaii, and oh, I see she's coming. We're talking about improving campus-wide instruction through a faculty-centered information literacy toolkit. Librarians in instruction, Becky DiMartini and Zoya Falevi. And my name is Stephanie Robertson. I'm adjunct faculty at BYU Hawaii in the English program. And I was also getting another master's in library information science. So I was their intern last semester in the library. And I think Becky's here now. But we'll go ahead with our next portion with Zoya.
Oh, go ahead, Steph.
Oh, 3 learning goals here.
Sorry, our campus is located, on Oahu. We wanted to have the Hawaiian, acknowledging the Hawaiian land.
Yes, so we acknowledge that we're situated in Hawaiian land of the Kanaka Maoli. As a library team, we wish to take our land acknowledgement further by situating Indigenous voice in all we do by using place-based pedagogy. And are currently, Zoya and Becky are working on IRB research, a study demonstrating how our Pacific Island students bring their ways of knowing to campus in a continual effort to amplify Indigenous voice and center them in decolonizing conversation at BYU Hawaii.
Yes. Thanks, Stephanie. And so our learning goals for this presentation, and each of us will expound on it throughout the presentation. And we hope that you will be able to one, apply steps from the outreach process used in information and creating this information literacy toolkit to your library instruction practices and goals. Our second goal outcome is to integrate best practices for promoting information literacy resources. And our third goal is to address faculty reluctance to adopting new materials into their course with ease.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk briefly a little bit about the process, because that's what we really learned a lot from here. As we all know that we needed to do different forms of teaching during the pandemic. And my role as the intern last semester was to help improve more digital resources for information literacy. And Zoya had a great idea to maybe create an information literacy toolkit that we could have in our Canvas, which is our LMS that we use as Canvas, in a plugins course that would be really easy for faculty. So I'm going to talk briefly about that process. We discussed needs and things that the library was already doing for information literacy and how to improve. We use the ADDIE model, and we're currently in the analysis stage and the beginning of the design stage for our information literacy toolkit that we'll be piloting sections of in the fall. But to get there, first we wanted to bring everybody into conversation. So first we wanted a focus survey here on my slide, identified library goals based on experience working with faculty and students. Next, we put that survey and we revised it. We included more voices into the conversation. We talked to Rose Ram on our campus, who's in charge of accreditation, and she reminded us about our information literacy rubric that we had with 5 items. So we revised our survey and included institutional outcomes after reviewing the draft with key stakeholders on campus, including our library director and our department. Then we revised our methods. And first I sent out the survey to 2 programs, starting with the English program, which is my home since 2009 as adjunct faculty. And we were hoping that we can build upon what they were already doing as subject matter experts in their disciplines, and help us to better understand best practices and methods moving forward in creating the toolkit. And we found some really interesting things. English department as our first gatekeepers, and students' first exposure to information literacy in English 101 on our campus, really gave some good feedback, but didn't have as much to contribute to the toolkit as we thought. So then I, saving my information and moving forward, I then talked to the social work program and found that they weren't doing a lot of information literacy across their program, and had some discussions with them and found that rather than surveys, which no one was really answering, except for my husband who's in the social work program and has to by marriage, we found that meeting one-on-one in Zoom just briefly was better for them, and bringing it to them and not making them feel like they had to do things. So we revised our process again, and it was all about access and collaboration, bringing as many voices into conversation as possible, including our LMS Canvas managers on campus, who also showed me the easiest ways to link faculty to the course without changing the content, and to easily plug things into their courses, because faculty are busy and they're overwhelmed by the changing pedagogical practices we all had to adapt to during the pandemic and moving forward as we tried to do hopefully more hybrid and face-to-face options. So I want to talk also briefly about, just improving our InfoLit culture on campus. The Joseph F. Smith Library already had great InfoLit resources, but the pandemic, as I mentioned, truly highlighted some opportunities to improve. And we want to make sure that this is effective and relevant resource. So we took time in the beginning to have as many voices in conversation as possible, so we're representative of our faculty and students and what they're actually going to need and use. And so that's my last point I want to emphasize here, is, it does take a little work to really talk to every single person that you can, but through talking to deans, admin, accreditation, librarians, faculty, adjunct faculty, our Center for Learning and Teaching, and bring as many voices into the conversation as possible, we can really center our process on place-based pedagogy, what our students actually need, what's actually helpful to our faculty, and what they will feel comfortable using. So we'll talk next about how to integrate these best practices and some lessons learned that we hope will help you folks as well. And we'll see you back.
Okay, can you guys hear me? I'm not going to turn on my video because I don't have good service, but I'll just talk.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk about what we have found out for our best practices for promoting our information literacy. So the big one was we're going to use Canvas. This past year, like I'm sure they've said, we used Canvas a lot. All of us are teachers, our faculty, so we have been using Canvas online for in Canvas as assignments. Just like we wanted people to hurry up and give us assignments that we could copy, they would like the same thing. So we're going to stick with creating these small assignments in Canvas instead of using the we were using Rise and the SCORM that came with it, and it says it can work, but it doesn't really work that great. So then we're also going to chunk it. So we have a great tutorial, a whole tutorial in Rise, and it's like a nice module, but it's kind of too long. We just still think it would be best split up, broken up, so teachers can use the pieces they need, change and modify the assignments that they want, and they can grade them how they want. So just chunk it, make it easier for the faculty. Short videos, yeah, we just have been using Loom videos a lot in our university, has a license for that. And we don't mind using our faces in the videos and just doing quick impromptu videos to get the information current, make sure that they can get a new video, because in the past that was kind of a problem. We wanted like the really polished videos and they just take too long. We don't have that time. So we're just going with the quick videos now, and to also, as usual, keep it short, break them up, just the little different steps that will keep everyone's attention and break the pieces down. And then the next slide, Zoya. Okay, and this is, we've kind of are rearranging our faculty or our librarians' responsibilities, because we are hiring now for an outreach librarian. So this person will be helping us complete this communication circle. So we want to make sure we can have communication in the beginning to help them say, look, this is really easy. Let me help you. I'll come over for 10 minutes. I'll show you this assignment. We can get it in there. And then in the middle, make sure that everything's working okay for them, see if they have questions, and then follow up at the end of the semester and see how did it go? What can we do better? What didn't work? Or what did you do to change it, so we can show other people? And then we've kind of started, if you want to see the idea real quick, Zoya, this is just a shell that we're working with. So this lucky person that we hire will get to work on this and decide how we're going to do it together. But three of our main goals at school are prepare, engage, and improve. And the curriculum is built around that. So that's just for our school specifically, but then focus on the JFS criteria. We're going along, these criteria go along with our library information literacy. What are they? Learning outcomes that we have to follow as a school. So we're going to do it. It's going to look something in Canvas. Zoya, go ahead.
No, it's just the framework that we follow.
Yeah. And then we did something fun, which was lunch with the librarians. We did that last year, and we promoted our Rise module of the new tutorial. And now we're going to do number 2. Maybe it's going to be dessert, I don't know. But then we're going to actually have them in there and show them right there, and then what they can do, and try to help them at that time to modify any assignments. So that's that.
Thank you, Becky. So my part is to address the faculty reluctance to adopting new materials into their course with ease, and how do we do that? So of course, this is not something new, but we do have and work with new faculty that may are not really willing to teach information literacy. So how do we do that? So meeting them where they are. I know each program should have an information literacy responsible person, at least for our institution, because information literacy is part of the ILO, one of the ILOs or the competency. So find that person in the program, and because that will be your connection to the rest of the faculty in that program. And also being aware of the program and course learning objectives. And also if they have any like standard-based competency in the field, like some majors have accreditation, they're accredited by a different accreditation agency. So find out what do they follow and see how it relates to information literacy. And then as Becky and Stephanie mentioned, meet them at informal and formal spaces. So request to be there at their department meetings. And I know a lot of us do that, but take 5-10 minutes and do your spiel and a tell and show. Tell them and then show them. And then most importantly, follow up and hold one-on-one meetings with each faculty individually. That's very important. And the next point is start with one or two things. One assignment, one skill set, one content, one method, one technique, one strategy. Just start with one thing. It doesn't have to be the whole information literacy component in their course. Just start simple. Just start simple and build from there. Another way to, work with faculty is staying in perpetual conversation with them and remind them as lifelong learners. I think Logan, well, some of the earlier presentations and posters, they mentioned like information literacy skills, right? So information literacy, it's not an isolated skill. It correlates, comport with, and build upon other competencies and learning abilities, such as critical thinking, problem solving, metacognition, critical information evaluation, active learning, all of that. So we need to focus on our students, student-centered, student-focused. Sometimes I say, I don't care about the faculty, I only care about the student, but that's not true. I shouldn't do that. But students, they are the sole purpose of why we do all of this. So we are not here to just teach library skills or information literacy, but we are here to make sure that these students leave their college careers with the appropriate and relevant knowledge and capabilities that will make them valuable and responsible in their personal and professional lives. And then align and build that toolkit criteria on the familiar framework. So like we showed at what Becky mentioned, the BYU Hawaii Center for Learning and Teaching has its frameworks, and the 3 key focuses: prepare, engage, and improve. And we're building that toolkit to align with those key focuses. And it's familiar to our faculty. So build something familiar to, that they're already working on. And then always follow through. Always be, in conversation with them and contact them. And just like everybody who has presented on this said, and also Becky and Stephanie mentioned. And then the last one, what they already have in place as subject matter experts in their unique discipline. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. See what do they already have, because they're the experts in their field, and they probably do, they do things in that correlates with their discipline. So make sure we find out what do they already have that we can use, that we can harness and include in our toolkits, and then ask if we can share with other faculty or other programs. And we, as librarians, and we can build on those strategies, make them better, improve upon it. And if they don't have anything in place, we offer them the toolkit. And, we have them tools and techniques that we have.
I'm sorry, 5 minutes left.
Okay, and then as Becky mentioned, create simple and short guidelines and videos for them to use. Anything that's easy. Okay.
So, in conclusion, basically, and I see a comment here, Emily said she mostly works with graduate students. It goes along with our included thought. And they have no idea how to do library research. They're not getting it as undergraduates. That's really what we're trying to address, truly, because we found just from the small start that I had in my internship, of getting this project rolling and just doing some legwork for it, is that it's not consistently taught about across programs, but programs would like to. And so we just like to assist them, meet them where they are, and taking time to be in conversation with as many sources and people as possible saves you time in the long run, because you'll have a resource that people will actually want to use. And the hope being that, of course, they will have so much consistent contact with information literacy concepts across their program in the language of their disciplines, that when they get to graduate school, it's not a foreign language. And so that is definitely the goal as an institution here. Like Zoya said, taking into consideration that different programs on our campus might have different objectives with their unique accreditation processes. So, you know, the new librarian will dig into that. And that's exciting that BYU Hawaii has made space for that to continually improve those efforts. In the end, you know, we found that they want short instructional videos created by librarians to teach information literacy skills to their students. That's what the faculty wanted. They want to be able to directly plug it into their Canvas course. I saw someone mention Canvas Commons. We would like to share eventually as things get developed, because, you know, it's reciprocal with open educational resources, right? We all share and we all rise together, which is the goal. And they want an assignment that they could adapt to their subject matter in the toolkit. So we'll create simple information literacy assignments that they can adapt in their unique discipline. And we will show them quickly in their program meetings where they already are. We'll meet them where they are. They don't have to have a special meeting with us if they don't want to. So that we can say, hey, here's how you grade it real quickly, right? And I'll adapt it for you. Or at that librarian lunch, you know, lunch at the library, let's do it right now. Let's put it in your course. It'll be real easy. So that we're not creating extra work for them, but just supporting them, because we know they're busy. They want to do well, but they need support, as we all do. And finally, we realized that we could model lifelong learning and pedagogical best practices through this process, and that they could implement when working with their students. So don't just stop with your institution, reach out to other librarians is something we learned. We talked to librarians in Ottawa, we talked to librarians in Arkansas, we talked to librarians everywhere in this process to see. We went to webinars, we attended conferences just like this. We read different scholarship, we used the ADDIE model, and we draw from each other. So anyway, thank you for your time.
We're gonna come talk to you guys as well. So
yes, so get ready. We're coming for you guys.
Yes.
But our final slide has our contact info. If you do want to be in conversation with us, we would absolutely love that as we continue to develop this. And I think we have 2 minutes if you have any questions.
Oh yeah, and we use Canva to create this presentation.
Canva for sure. I see someone doing workshops for TAs, also helps them learn. That's great. We have a ton of adjunct faculty on our campus, and they don't have TAs, and I'm adjunct faculty. We really love to go to our Center for Learning and Teaching for workshops that they do support and pay us for a bit. And so we definitely would want to work with them there as well, because adjunct faculty, you know, we don't get paid a ton. So it's nice when we can meet them where they're at and they can get paid a bit too. That would be a fun idea as well. Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much. We will have time at the end for questions again. So if folks want to think about that a little bit. But yeah, thank you for presenting a lot. I know a lot of us have concerns about how to connect with reluctant faculty, and that was coming up in the chat as well. So yeah, thank you for your presentation.
Mahalo for having us. Our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. So let me see, next up, we have Christina Clement and Rihanna Murphy, who are presenting on In the Arena, a framework for brave and vulnerable peer teaching observations.
All right, thank you so much. Rihanna, you good to go?
I'm ready.
Okay, excellent. Get our slides up here. All right, does that look all right?
Looks good.
Okay. All right, so hello, and thank you so much for joining us for our session titled In the Arena, a framework for brave and vulnerable conversations about peer teaching observations. I'm Christina Clement, the Student Success Librarian at the University of Wyoming, and my pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Rihanna Murphy, an MLIS student at the University of Denver, and my pronouns are she, her.
So we've put together a Google Drive folder that contains all of our presentation materials and several other resources that relate to our presentation. Everything is openly licensed. You're welcome to use, remix, and adapt our work to fit your needs. And Rihanna should have dropped that in the chat. All right, so we are really glad that everyone is here. And before we get started with the full presentation, we wanted to ask everyone a question. So you can click on the link that Rihanna just dropped in the chat, or you can go to www.menti.com and enter in the code at the top of the screen. We'd like you to think back to the times that your instruction was being observed or evaluated, and how did that make you feel? You can send in multiple words or phrases, and as they're submitted, we'll see them here on the screen. We'll take about 45 seconds to do that. Nervous, yes, always nervous. And we'll put a link to the results of this poll in our Google folder after the conference, if anyone would like to go back and see it. Okay, we'll give it about 10 more seconds. Awesome. So you can continue to send in your words to the poll if you want, but we're going to flip back to our slides. All right, so this is what we're going to cover today in our 20 minutes, and I do apologize because we're going to go really fast. There's a lot to go over here. So first, we're going to go over very briefly what we gleaned from the literature, and then how the framework came into existence. Next, we'll go over the framework itself, and then the resources that we've put together for you.
So first, let's look at the literature about peer teaching observations. We'll consider the way peer observation has been traditionally organized, what makes peer observation successful, and how empathy and vulnerability impact the process. So the traditional peer observation model consists of 3 phases. During the first phase, both participants meet to discuss the goals and objectives of the process. During the second phase, the classroom observation takes place. And finally, in the third phase, the participants reconvene to discuss feedback from phase 2. So successful peer observation occurs when a number of factors are taken into consideration. Both participants should feel emotionally safe and respected as human beings. The intent of the process should not be grounded in measuring one's worthiness of the position, but should instead focus on effective growth. The process should also promote self-reflection and responsibility in order to foster open and honest dialogue. And finally, successful peer observation should remain confidential and free of judgment and shame. Another factor in successful peer observation is care-based assessment, which provides room for empathy and vulnerability. Empathy is fundamental in balancing power because it promotes an environment of understanding where shameful undertones are eliminated. Likewise, vulnerability provides a safe place to be honest as one's performance is not critiqued by measurable scale. So at its core, successful peer observation occurs when both participants are allowed to form an authentic connection that supports a meaningful relationship and experience.
So up next, we're going to take a look at how this even kind of came into existence. When I started my current job, one of the things that we were told to do was to have our peers evaluate our instruction sessions. And I was told that these evaluation forms are really good things to put in your tenure and promotion packets. And that was about it. So of course, as a new librarian in my first professional role, I said, okay, and I started scheduling evaluations. At first, I didn't really question the evaluation form or the process because it looked a lot like teaching evaluation forms that I'd seen in the past, and everything appeared to be pretty standard. Eventually, though, our instruction department started changing the ways in which we approached teaching information literacy, and it became really clear that the peer teaching evaluation forms that we were using were no longer representative of how we taught. So I started talking with my supervisor about updating our form. Much of this conversation about peer teaching evaluations with my supervisor stemmed from one particularly disastrous experience I had evaluating a colleague, which I'll tell you more about here in a little bit. But from that point on, I knew that we really needed to change something. So before I tell you that story, I wanted to show you a little bit of what our old form looked like. It was a really good form for the time in which it was created and for the professional standards that our profession held at that point. But it hadn't been updated since 2013, as far as I could tell. And it covered some very basic functions of library instruction in a checklist style, which for the way we are doing things now in my department is not particularly helpful. And I really think that checking boxes only really checks to see if you fit in a box. And I started feeling like if I didn't check off a box on that checklist, I was going to get in trouble and mark down lower on my evaluation. And this was not a productive way of thinking. So after some consideration, I couldn't see how checking all the boxes on a form would in any way make me a better and more effective instructor. Overall, the old form had little flexibility, especially for the wide variety of sessions that we were now teaching. Not all our sessions looked the same, and not all of them followed a classic lesson plan. We had also been working on better understanding the ACRL framework for information literacy in higher education and updating the way that we did our peer evaluations fit right in with the education that we were doing. All right, so story time. Several years ago, my colleagues and I were doing peer evaluations for our tenure and promotion packets. Normally, we initiate the process, but in this case, my supervisor asked me to evaluate a colleague. And this particular colleague was really open about how much they hated being observed and how much anxiety it gave them. So normally when doing an evaluation, I'd get the day, time, and form from my colleague, and then I'd just show up. And I knew that this was going to be a really bad idea for the colleague who hated being observed. So instead of following our standard protocol, I decided to sit down with my colleague ahead of time and talk about the evaluation process and what they wanted me to look for during the session. I really hoped that this would ease some of the fear of being observed and let my colleague set the direction for the evaluation. But that conversation did not go well. The fear was so deeply rooted that the conversation was mostly about how much they feared and hated the observation process and not how to make it better and more productive. So because we couldn't have that conversation, the observation went pretty much as expected, not well. Afterwards, I tried to sit down with my colleague to help them to develop an action plan to overcome the fear of evaluations and let them know that it really had nothing to do with their skill as an instructor at all. It was more about how this particular evaluation process affected their ability to be themselves in the classroom. The follow-up didn't go well either, and the action plan never came to fruition. I think mostly because there was just a lot of shame and embarrassment over the evaluation and the whole process. So based on this experience, I knew that something really needed to change, and not just how we did our evaluations, but why we did them. My supervisor agreed. We started to talk more about what a revamped peer evaluation would look like. And one change that I knew I wanted to specifically make was to not call them evaluations anymore, but rather observations. Because my supervisor and I both agreed that evaluations didn't add much to our tenure and promotion packets, and that observations, conversely, could be used to help us grow and evolve as library professionals, and that was much more valuable. Of course, COVID hit and we put everything on pause, but throughout the pandemic, I was really thinking about how to redo these observations and tie them into the continuing education we were doing with the ACRL framework. And I also started diving deep into a lot of Brene Brown's work on shame, vulnerability, and bravery. And this framework for brave and vulnerable peer teaching observations started to form. And we're looking forward to really truly launching this once we're all back in the office. So if anyone here is familiar with Brene Brown's work, you've probably heard her talk about core values. They can be just about anything, but they have to be representative of your true and authentic self. So as I was thinking about this framework that I wanted to create for our peer teaching observations, I started to think about what core values a process like this would have. And I came up with these 4. So bravery, which is choosing courage over comfort; vulnerability, which is having the courage to show up when you don't know the outcome; trust, which is respecting boundaries and being reliable, holding ourselves accountable and being generous; and kindness, which is giving and receiving with an open heart. These 4 core values essentially form the backbone of this framework. And by living into these values, we can hopefully take something that's usually anxiety-inducing, unproductive, and critical, and turn it into something that helps us grow and change as information professionals.
So next we'll look at the framework for the new model. So the traditional framework lacked flexibility and room for true connection. The first phase only allowed participants to consider the nuts and bolts of the observation, such as when and where it would take place. The observation phase only consisted of a basic standardized form that was filled out during the class. And the last phase was simply a collection of information where dialogue was limited or even non-existent. So the goal of the framework is to put everyone into a different mindset and dismantle the deficit thinking that we so often have when we're evaluated and doing the evaluating. We aren't using this framework to identify what our peers lack. We're using it to build each other up and establish a true sense of community in our instruction programs. We really like this quote from Brene Brown, which we feel sums up the spirit of this framework. It says, "Imperfections are not inadequacies, they're reminders that we're all in this together." So while the new framework follows a similar pattern of the traditional model, it provides room for more meaningful experience. The first phase introduces both participants to the process and allows them to organize the details in a way that is comfortable for both of them. And the second phase is when the observation formally takes place, but the setting is more relaxed and excludes filling out official forms during the observation. The third phase allows time for individual reflection, where both participants privately consider the observation and prepare for the feedback session. During the fourth phase, participants reconvene to exchange feedback. And finally, during the fifth phase, both participants meet for the last time to ensure their interpretations of the feedback have remained clear.
The new pre-observation worksheet has elements of a traditional observation, but it takes it further and asks the one being observed to reflect on why they want a particular person to observe their instruction. I used to choose my closest colleagues for my evaluations because I knew they were in my corner and they would probably give me a favorable evaluation. This was not a brave choice, and I did not take the time to think about whether or not that person would help me grow as a professional because my focus was all about fitting in that box and checking off the list. So the worksheet asks the one being observed to consider some important questions to help set the expectations that the observed and the observer will go over during a pre-observation meeting. So by answering these questions, you can try and set realistic expectations for the instruction sessions, which include both the things that you're proud of and you do well, and the things that you feel like you want to work on. The second side of the pre-observation worksheet is meant for both the observed and the observer, and that's the agreements. These agreements help the observed and the observer live into the core values of this peer observation framework: bravery, vulnerability, trust, and kindness. They connect the work that you do before the observation to the actual observation itself. And because we think these are really important, we want to take the time and read through them with you. So for the observed, for bravery, it says, "I will choose courage over comfort and embrace the discomfort that comes with being observed."
And for the observer under bravery, it says, "I will recognize the bravery it takes to put yourself on display for observation, for I will also be in that position one day."
For the observed, for vulnerability, it says, "I will acknowledge that I am in an uncertain situation, parts of which I can control and parts of which I cannot. I will show up and be my best and most authentic self that I can be today."
And for the observer under vulnerability, it says, "I will understand that I am in a position of power as an observer and that I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to recognize potential and help my colleague develop skills and strengths."
For the observed, for trust, "I will set the boundaries that clearly define the purpose and intent of the observation. I will be accountable for my conduct and I'll ask for what I need when I need it."
And for the observer under trust, it says, "I will not share information about the observation with others that is not mine to share. I will be a reliable observer and I will not promise more than I can deliver."
For the observed, for kindness, it says, "I understand that clear is kind and unclear is unkind. I will be clear about my expectations for the observation."
And for the observer under kindness, it says, "I understand that clear is kind and unclear is unkind. I will be clear in my feedback about the observation."
This brings us to the actual observation, and there are no forms or checklists for the observation. They're too distracting, and it's not about being right or wrong in how we teach. It's about becoming better at what we do. And we do this through practicing empathy and vulnerability, where we do our best to care for our peers as we would want to be cared for. Now, if you
minute warning, sorry.
Now, if you are a little type A like I can be, you might be panicking a little at the thought of having, not having a form to fill out as an observer. And it's okay to feel anxious at this unstructured method for observing a peer's teaching. But based on the reading and research I've done on bravery and vulnerability, I really feel like not having a checklist or a form to fill out helps dismantle the power construct that arises with peer teaching evaluations, because there isn't one person trying to check the boxes instead of focusing on their instruction, and another person trying to look for the cracks and flaws in the instruction they're observing. We really feel like this is a better, more productive way to help grow and shape our professional environment. So next comes reflection, which helps everyone get ready for the feedback phase.
So the reflection phase encourages participants to explore how they have navigated the agreements. The bravery questions ask how the participants have been courageous, how they've prepared for each phase, and how they've coped. The vulnerability questions ask how their participants' strengths, what was under their control, and how they authentically feel about the process. The trust questions ask how participants have remained focused on the intent of the observation, how they have honored their colleagues' boundaries, and whether their own boundaries have been respected. And the kindness questions ask how they've remained kind to their colleague and themselves, and whether they and their colleague have remained clear.
Once you've finished up your post-reflection or your reflection post-observation worksheets, the next step is to see if you're ready to sit down and give and receive feedback. This engaged feedback checklist, which we've adapted from Brene Brown's really fantastic work, Dare to Lead, which is my favorite leadership book I've ever read, helps both people recognize when they're going to be ready to talk about the observation. It's relatively simple and similar to the pre-observation agreements in the sense that it also helps to dismantle that power dynamic that traditional observations and evaluations tend to create between the observer and the observed. So for the observer, 1, I'm ready to sit next to you rather than across from you. 2, I'm willing to put my observations about your teaching in front of us instead of between us. 3, I want to acknowledge what you did well instead of focusing on your mistakes. 4, I can hold you accountable for improvement without shaming or blaming you. 5, I can genuinely thank you for your efforts rather than criticize you for your failings. 6, we can model the vulnerability and openness that we expect from each other.
And for the observed, number 1, I'm ready to sit next to you rather than across you. 2, I'm ready to listen, ask questions, and accept that I might not fully understand the evaluation at first. 3, I'm willing to own my part. 4, I can talk about how I will work to grow and improve from your observations. And 5, we can model the vulnerability and openness that we expect from each other.
So it feels like this is a really step-heavy process, just to do a peer evaluation or observation. And it certainly may be the first few times you might work within this framework, but I think that the more you do it and the more it becomes culture within your instruction department, the more lived in this framework becomes and the steps seem significantly less time consuming. The last step in the framework is rumbling with your reality, which is where we reality check the feedback we gave or received and make sure that we're not making up a story based on what we think rather than what we learned. And I don't know about you all, but sometimes, especially when I'm having a hard conversation, I get tunnel vision, my limbs start to go kind of numb, and I have a really hard time focusing on the actual conversation. And if I didn't take notes or if it wasn't recorded in some way, I will sometimes start filling in the blanks in my brain with stories that don't represent reality. And that faux reality that I've now created starts to become my truth about the situation. And unless I reality check myself, it never turns out well. So the concept of a rumble comes again from Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, in which she defines it as a discussion, conversation, or meeting with shared commitments to these 6 things on this slide. I think taking the concept of a rumble and applying it to reality can be really helpful when feedback is involved. You can do all of these 6 things alone or in conversation with someone else in order to help reality check your perception of the feedback you either gave or received. And it can take just about any form you want it to take. It could be a solo activity or it could be in conversation with your colleague. And so this graphic here shows some phrasing that you can use to help rumble with your reality. And my favorite is the first one, the story I'm making up. I personally use that one all the time to help me reality check things, all sorts of things at work and in my personal life. But several of these other questions or phrases can be helpful when you circle back with the person you either observed or who observed you to go over the feedback one last time and make sure that you fully understand the intent and the impact. So this last step may or may not be necessary, but I do recommend giving yourself a small reality check after the feedback session, after you've had some time to reflect on the feedback that you either gave or received.
So to recap, the Brave and Vulnerable Peer Teaching Framework includes 5 steps. 1, the pre-observation meeting where the agreements, goals, and expectations are set. 2, the observation session where the instruction is observed in a relaxed classroom environment. 3, the individual reflections, where participants reflect on the observation. 4, the feedback session, where participants exchange kind criticism. And 5, the rumble with your reality, where participants check their personal narratives for clarity.
So the last little 30 seconds of our presentation is just sharing that link for the resources with you again. Here's the link again for our Google folder. And in this, you can find our slide deck and a full outline for the presentation, a PDF of just the slides, and a PDF of the slides with the script that we've just given for this presentation. We also have a lot of documentation for a lot of these worksheets, some inspirational documents, and then just a sample of the literature that we looked at for this presentation. So thank you so much for attending.
Thank you both so much. This is such an empathetic, empowering way to deal with observations. And yeah, judging by the chat in the conversation in the chat, it really resonated with people. So thank you. Just to, let me see. So before we jump into the Q&A, just to double check, are Mary Snyder and Amber Eakin in the room by any chance? Mary Snyder and Amber Eakin? I don't think they are. Let me know if I'm missing any notifications. So in that case, why don't we go ahead and move into the Q&A, but one last round of applause for all our wonderful presenters. We appreciate you, and this conference wouldn't have happened without you. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. Let me navigate to the right slide. Let's see. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for such a wonderful day of sharing your expertise. I learned so much from everybody's presentations and insights, and also got to learn from attendees' expertise and insights in the chat as well. We've made it to our Q&A. We have ample time to dive into any questions that folks have for any part of today's program. So how we're gonna do this is really, it's gonna kind of go with the flow. If you want to share your question in the chat, I will go ahead and look there, but you're also welcome to unmute. So I know we had a number of questions that were shared earlier. So I'm just going to go ahead and see. I don't see anybody's hands raised, but I'm looking in the Q&A. But does anybody have any questions just off the cuff that they'd like to ask to any of our presenters? Let's see. Yeah, I totally echo Michael in the chat. Fantastic presentations and content. I guess I'll just rummage through the chat to see if, oh, okay, Aisha, I see your hand raised.
All right, the host hand is like hidden. Hi, thanks everybody. Really great content today. I've learned a lot. Just going back to the last presentation, I just had kind of more of a logistical question. Are you folks faculty, and do you have a faculty eval as a part of your process? I'm at SCC now, and our evaluations are pretty contractual and very jargony. So I was trying to think of how to maybe embed your process into what we have, which is basically a form that we use that echoes the form for faculty and other disciplines. So I was wondering kind of if you all have a similar structure or if you're using something different. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So at the University of Wyoming, librarians are faculty equivalent. When I started, we were more faculty equivalent than we are now. They've changed some of our regulations in the few years that I've been here. And so we go through basically kind of the same tenure and promotion process that regular faculty do, but I mean, it's all kept internal until you go up for your promotion. And we can kind of put whatever we want in those packets. Because we're not considered teaching faculty, we don't have a standard like teaching evaluation that has to go in with those. And we've kind of decided in my department that we're not going to include the peer evaluation forms anymore because we've decided they don't add anything to our cases. So I think what we're going to try and do with this new framework is use it as more of an internal growth mechanism rather than something that goes along either with our annual reviews or our promotion reviews. So does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Thanks so much, Christina. Yeah, fantastic presentation to both of you. Okay, I do see a question. Well, Danielle asked if we could go back to our presentation about gifts and how to find resources for gifts. But I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Danielle, that I missed. I did note that there were other people who had similar questions. So if I'm missing any part of what you want to get at, please do jump in. Okay, it's possible that our presenter may have stepped out of the room. So we can definitely get back to that. Yeah, Aisha just put in the chat, a few people mentioned Giphy, Google search GIF. So those are probably a couple ways, and I'm definitely probably missing something. Reddit, for sure. Well, I have a question, but I want to make sure that our attendees can get their questions answered before I go there. So, okay, I do see one from Jane, specifically to the BYU Hawaii presenters. Do you use a LibGuide to organize, promote InfoLit materials for faculty too? Or is everything in the Canvas shell?
Traditionally, a LibGuide was used, various LibGuides for sure. And I think the interesting thing of having me be an intern for them was I was coming in with two sets of lenses, one as adjunct faculty since 2009, and the other as training to be a librarian. And I didn't know, what all the LibGuides were and things like that. And I think that just speaks to a different mode that we're transitioning into in education, which doesn't mean that LibGuides aren't helpful. They're good to link to, but how can we draw people to the LibGuides, to our website? And that's through social media, which is something we didn't mention. That's something I worked on the internship, but also through meeting them where they're at in the LMS that we already use, which is Canvas. So essentially creating these modules in Canvas, the information literacy toolkit and other items in our BYU Hawaii Canvas plugins course will kind of serve that purpose. So we could link to LibGuides that exist already that are very helpful in that, but faculty really are now more so used to Canvas courses and getting their resources from there. It's like a shared space almost.
Yeah, and with the pandemic, and I mean, with remote learning, everybody, the faculty are now, and students are now familiar with Canvas. So, and we wanted to make that the familiar space for the library too, to be on there. And link, like what Stephanie said, and link to our LiveGuides resources.
Thank you both. Thank you so much. Let's see, before we get to Krista's question, I do see her hands up. I think I saw Kelsey jump back in. Is Kelsey here?
I am. Hello. Sorry,
Awesome.
I was picking up my dog child from dog school over here on the East Coast. Yeah.
No problem, no problem. So we had a lot of questions for you actually, revolving around gifts. So if we could circle back to that, I think there were questions about resources. And I see a question from Emily. So I'll let you go ahead and answer some of those as you can. And we'll also acknowledge Krista's question after.
Yeah, are they in the chat? I don't know if I can see what was in there before I came in. Would you mind? Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah.
So let's see. I think Danielle was asking earlier specifically if you can recommend any resources for gift, maybe gift making and finding.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's one more, but I'll get back to that after.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, the main place that I recommend definitely getting started, and one of my favorites is Giphy.com, which is Giphy. And I really like them. They've got some really easy YouTube or like YouTube creation kind of platforms. So If you just got a YouTube link, you can drop that in and snip out whatever you want. Also, if you have a Mac, they allow you to actually make GIFs just by screen recording, which is really cool. I also really like Giphy's done a lot of work to try and improve or representation and make representation like more across the board with GIF culture. And they do a lot of cool things with GIF artists and trying to push GIF art forward. And so they're doing a lot of really interesting things to kind of combat some of the issues with GIF culture as well, which I think is really cool. So I definitely recommend it as a place to start. And I also really like Tumblr a lot personally. There are a lot of really awesome GIF creators on Tumblr. A lot of them are just like 14-year-old, like kids in their house making the best GIF that you can find. And they're really cool and cool cultures to get kind of tapped into as well.
Thanks, Kelsey. And I see people are saying that their 70-year-old uncles are like all up on GIFs and their social media.
Yeah.
Multi-generational. And with that, maybe a follow-up question from Emily. They would like to know, has anyone used or assessed GIF use with adult learners?
I have not, but that's something I'd be like really curious about, and something that I really want to start increasing more some of the research that we're doing around GIFs and how people choose them and use them. For the most part, I've worked with, because I worked at UNC and then work at Tech, so worked with college age students with them. But I think it would be really cool, and it's a fun way to capture your community if you're creating your own GIFs, and also a fun way to help people connect across distances as well, especially during the pandemic, a way to kind of share emotions. Or sorry, there was just some kind of puppy commotion. We've got a 1-year-old Sheltie in the house today. So you okay? But yes, I have not, but think that would be really cool. And if folks want to reach out and talk more about what that could look like, I would love to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think one way would be definitely to maybe contact presenters directly, or even in our networking introduction Padlet. Yeah. Definitely, give people some messages and input there as well. So those are a couple of ways to kind of connect on that level. So I'm going to pop away from the chat for a second and go to the hands up question. Krista, I see you have your hands up. So I don't know if you want to ask your question. Unmute. Floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry, I was writing everything down about the gifts. Yeah, I have a question for the folks from Hawaii about your information literacy toolkit that you're incorporating into your courseware. Do you have a strong classroom instruction program as well? Has there been any pushback from the librarians who are used to going into the classrooms and doing their kind of traditional courses, or is this something that's being used in conjunction to anything you might have? Just how do those two relate?
Yeah, well, I used to have Zoya when we were off face-to-face come into my class every semester, or Becky, and I think that the two can go hand in hand. We are working on a synthesizing sources workshop as well that will be in our plugins Canvas course alongside our toolkit that we can also do face-to-face. And I think it's great accessibility wise to have lots of options like that correlate and complement each other, because some people might learn best from the workshops in class and some might learn best, and so it all seeks to enhance and support our faculty in whichever way that they see fit as subject matter discipline experts. Zoya, did you have something to add to that?
Yes, so we're going to the faculty and seeing what they have, so we can steal those. So we can use them too and share with, and we can maybe edit or update it or make it more seamless or more easier to adapt to other courses. And then we will probably ask them if we can share with the other programs or with the other faculties across campus. Yes. So did that answer your question, Krista?
Yeah, I think it's all about having options, just variety. And I'm the type A kind of person who would like to say, this is our exact framework and structure. Here's exactly, but I think that because there's so many moving parts on campus when it comes to different forms of accreditation requirements for information literacy, different ways that they teach it in their discipline. And, so we'll just try to make as many options as possible. And whoever gets the new librarian position, that will be really about faculty outreach, can have those one-on-one conversations and make sure that we are providing what they need, whether it be face-to-face instruction or just plugging in something from their course and our little toolkit.
Yeah. For an example, Stephanie has a mindfulness activity that she has in her course, in her English course, that I want to use for my class. And I also want to use in a library workshop because I feel it's like it'll work. So I have to ask Stephanie if I can use or have her come teach a library workshop or come teach my Pacific, because I teach a Pacific Island Studies class. So have her come teach that. And it's an information literacy type of assignment that she uses. And it's a mindfulness, but it's related to information literacy.
Yeah, and a final thought with that is this is also a great effort in us reaching across programs to not just rely on English 101 to give them the one shot of information literacy, but to see what people are using, work together, not everyone be in a silo, but work across programs to make sure our students get consistent contact with information literacy concepts, since it's such a broad idea. And they'll be prepared for their careers, for graduate school, and just being good global citizens who are information literate.
And I wanted to add, sorry, Ava, I wanted to add something. So we're trying to change our library. Reimagine a service where we can teach students. The library, we're a place where we can teach learning skills. So things like teaching them metacognition, how do you use metacognition to study, where we can teach mindfulness, how to use mindfulness to study. So we're coming up with a proposal and a program that we want the library to not only teach information literacy, but teach other learning skills that the students can use during their college careers. And hopefully it will make them better learners and better global citizens, like what Stephanie mentioned.
Amen.
Thank you, Zoya. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely acknowledging our humanity and traumas and lived experiences and everything that comes with this as we enter those education gates or whatever you want to call it. So let's see. I see there is a question from Allison, and it's for Christina. Let's see. How do you broach the conversation with your coworkers, supervisors about how ineffective the eval forms were, especially as a new professional?
That's a really good question. And yeah, definitely something that I think in that first year of that position, I wouldn't even have attempted to touch. But a couple of years into my position, we got a new department chair who is my direct supervisor, and he really seemed receptive to new ideas and shaking things up. And so I think it all kind of started when he wanted me to evaluate that colleague. And we actually had to sit down in between doing the eval and then me talking to the colleague to sort of look at this form together and be like, this form is worthless. Like it's not accurately showing what my colleague can do in the classroom, because just the whole concept of being evaluated is paralyzing for this person. And so I think I got really lucky in the sense that my supervisor was really open to new ideas and to trying new things. And it was actually because of him that we started investigating the ACRL framework as a department. That was something I also suggested we had to do. So we were still operating on the old standards that were retired in like 2016 or something. So working with him on these new ideas has been really, really pleasant, pretty easy. Now, we were literally working on this like in February and March of 2020. So we haven't fully taken it to the whole department yet, but I think they're going to be kind of receptive. I think they're going to be kind of glad that we're not doing checklist forms anymore and that they don't serve an evaluative purpose. So I'm hoping that that conversation with the coworkers goes well. But having my supervisor's support and knowing that he fully supports all of this, I think will make it a much easier process. So yeah, I got really lucky in a lot of ways. I think if anyone else had come into that supervisory role, it may not have, might not be here presenting about this today because it may have never happened.
Thank you, Christina. Yeah, I'm just thinking about how that would apply to like all of us who are at different types of institutions, like public libraries, community college, school libraries, special libraries, or archives, special collections. I wonder what are the contracts like, and what is the culture and dynamics of our contracts and institutions. I do see Michael's hands, so I want to kind of move to him. And I also have a question after for John and Kale, but definitely Michael, I want to acknowledge you first, so the floor is all yours.
Cool. Thank you. So I have a question for Megan and Michelle from CCSF. Megan, you just disappeared though, so I don't know, maybe it's not a good time. It's kind of an impossible question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So you were talked about, in talking about privacy and talking about the kind of, some students seem to have a sense of like, I don't care about all these privacy issues or so on. And some of the students were like, yes, I'm really engaged with this and this is really important to me. And I guess what I'm wondering about is, you know, how you may, if you're running into students who are resistant to the idea of, you know, privacy and, you know, all of these things being something that they should be concerned with. I'm just wondering how you engage with them and sort of address that. And I know, like, it's, you know, it is kind of an impossible question. It's like, how do you change someone's mind, you know, but I'm curious.
I don't think it's possible to change somebody's mind per se. I think my approach is to take small steps, maybe to show them like certain elements, and try and align it with something that might be important to them, I guess. Because I don't mind being tracked. It's because they look at it as a way to make their life easier. Like if they're searching for something online, then if they find it, it's easier for them to find it because all these companies already know what they like. I guess I just chip away. That's all I can do, because usually the students that don't mind being tracked are pretty vocal about it as well. So I just do what I can and try and change their mind in little ways. Megan, is that what you would suggest?
Yeah, I actually like don't give any opinions on the way. I just like make sure I mention it happening, right? Like it's not my choice. Like Michelle and I have done workshops where we have this like spectrum, right? And one end of the spectrum is like a privacy nihilist, and the other side is the privacy vegan. And we have people mark themselves on that, like, you know, and it's the whole range, like people who are like, I share everything, they know everything already. I share nothing, and like I am a hermit, you know, like I'm not there to change their mind, but I know there's a perception, especially with library things, that like we don't violate privacy. There's a perception of trust. And I guess what I'm trying to make clear is like, you know, we're sort of beholden to the same tools that are available online at this time with very little regulation. And so just because you're on a library thing doesn't mean that you're in a safer space or whatever. Yeah, so I don't like make any judgments about it. I just make sure that I point out each example of it that's happening, and it's everybody else's choice to make that for themselves.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Michael, for your question. You all have M's, and I just realized that's M, and M. So I don't know why I made that little connection. Yeah, I guess I want chocolate. Okay, so I have a question for John and Kale. I don't know if John is still here, but I think I saw Kale.
Yeah, John had to leave.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
He's traveling today.
Oh, that sounds nice. Well, I'm glad he was able to join us despite the traveling. Let me see. So my question is, because I feel like today, in a lot of ways, whether inadvertently or advertently, we talked about power structures. And today's, wonderful lineup of presentations. And for your roundtable, you talked somewhat about, definitely settler colonialism and linking that to LIS.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, like, what are your thoughts on how decolonization or talking about settler colonialism, whether it be in cataloging or in higher education or any educational structure, what are your thoughts about how decolonization and those concepts that you raised in your roundtable are discussed in LIS currently, and where do we need to go from here?
That's a great question. I would say that in LIS, I think there's I've been doing reading, trying to read as much as I can on kind of these indigenous studies, the intersection of indigenous studies and libraries, and there's not a whole lot out there. And so that's one of the reasons. So a little bit of background, John's philosophy of education is his kind of background, and he and I kind of got into these conversations about decolonization and the roles of the settler in supporting decolonization in kind of cultural studies realms. And so trying to pull it into LIS information. Of course, LIS is part of the, invoke Louis Althusser here. It's part of the ideological state apparatus. And so there's movement there. I would like to see more talk about it, because my eyes were really opened when working with John. He helped me kind of see the ways that erasure for indigenous peoples continues today, and that and it's not a past kind of thing. It's a present structure. So I'm kind of at the beginning end of this, but I'm kind of thinking about this. One of the things we've done here at the school to address that is we've hosted events with the Nisqually tribe, and we've another thing that I'm doing as a white settler is I've held kind of events and things like that where we're talking about whiteness. So starting to deconstruct that white frame that seems to, mention power structures. And so trying to deconstruct that to open up space for other voices. I see Allison's note about the Deer Indigenous classification system. Yes, I am aware of that. I'm not doing cataloging, so that's not something I've jumped into, but I am aware of that. Did that answer your question, Eva?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I was just curious because that's a very powerful word and thought. I have other thoughts around decolonization, white settler colonialism, education, mind, body, spirit, land linkages. So sometimes I see a lot of buzzwords happening in LIS, and I think they're very deeply rooted in philosophies that shouldn't be appropriated. So that's why I asked. And yeah, so thank you.
And that's why John and I are developing this concept of desettling to honor, the indigenous, and thinking back all the way to Frantz Fanon, that idea that decolonizing is the work of the colonized. Okay, let's honor that. How do we think about how settlers or colonists who are sympathetic and supportive, how do we think about our work in that sense? And so that's why we've developed that concept.
Thanks, Kel. Yeah, I look forward to learning more about what you and John are working on, and also learning more about what was shared in the chat. Let's see, I don't know if there are any more questions, but we have some more time because unfortunately some of our presenters, our last presenter was not able to join us, so we hope they're okay. But we thought this was a great opportunity to kind of circle back to the morning's roundtable breakouts and see if there was anything that people want to summarize or talk about that kind of was illuminated during that time. We have around 10 minutes. So we kind of gonna kickstart that off a little bit with Kale and John's session. I don't know if other folks from the other breakouts want to share anything from their sessions. And thank you so much, because I see Liz adding the collaborative notes. So please, anybody jump in. Definitely want to give the presenters a moment if they're here to share about their session. Thanks, Cal. I saw the link that you added. Well, if there's no one else from the other sessions that wants to share, maybe do you want to share any last thoughts from your session earlier, Cal, and then we can jump off to other questions, or maybe that'll inspire others to share.
I don't want to hog up time. Does anybody have thoughts? I didn't, let's see, I'm trying to get back to I did include a list of kind of questions that we can start asking, and I've that settlers, and I'm gonna talk about it from a settler's perspective. There's a Canadian activist and adjunct faculty member, and I love what she talks about Indigenous settler relationships in terms of relationality. But she makes this comment that, most settlers are clueless when it comes to Indigenous, to the lives of Indigenous persons. And so that first step is really finding out and learning about Indigenous groups in our area locally. And so I've developed this list of questions and things like that. And John and I worked on this list together, and I expanded it a little bit, but kind of broken down into whose land are you on? Whose homelands are we on? And what has their experience with colonization been? I wanted to mention, I didn't get to mention in the session, other steps that we can take. So that first step is as settlers, we need to engage with learning about Indigenous groups. We need to do our homework. We can't go to Indigenous groups and then say, tell me about yourself. We need to do the homework ahead of time. But then a couple other steps that I was kind of throw together that we can think about is, how can libraries call attention to local tribes in the present? Remember, their Indigenous groups are not gone. And so we need to really do that. How can a tribe's language be incorporated into library practices, such as cataloging? So I'm working with the cataloger here, and we're going to try identify as many tribal names as we can find, right? With RDA opening up things we can put in. What's the name? What does the tribe call themselves? Include that there. How can libraries facilitate or amplify local tribal voices, especially when it comes to challenges to tribal sovereignty? For the last Indigenous Peoples Day, we had a couple of tribal elders come in and give a presentation, and they talked about up in the Puget Sound region, there was a potential threat to fishing rights and things like that. So looking for ways to bring their voices in, Indigenous voices. And I'm talking too much.
Thank you, Kel. No, that's great. I think like that's what this time is for, is to kind of just share and dialogue on what was discussed today. So thank you. I just want to just check in with folks if there are any last minute questions. I do see one, let's see, from Zoya. They would like to, or she would like to know which Indigenous groups have you worked with?
So we're on Nisqually land, so I'm involved with that. I'm also, if anybody wants to read a really messed up story about the American nation state and Indigenous groups, learn about the Chinook. I'm involved with some efforts to, I've put their name in there, kind of efforts to help fundraise for that, for they've not received federal recognition. And it's totally a stupid story. So primarily the Nisqually and the Chinook. I'm kind of involved in kind of trying to do the work at the university. I haven't yet, I've built up a relationship of trust with one of the tribal elders, but not others. And so I'm trying to really be careful about how I do that. I mean, one of the things I've learned from John is you have to be invited, and I have not been fully invited yet. So I'm trying to do the work with other settlers right now.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate your answering that question. Let's see. Any other questions? If not, we can move on to our wrap up. But I think folks are feeling good about everything that we've gone over. So I'll just share my screen one last time. Let's see. I do want to announce a few things before we call it a day. And of course, I have to go through the slides once again. So give me 1 second to get towards. Okay. So as we wrap up, I just want to share a few thoughts. There will be an evaluation form that will be going into the chat right now. I want to share that once you fill out that form, there is an opportunity to enter a raffle. So thank you so much to Esther, Caroline, and Michael for making their kind donations. These are some of the images of things that you can potentially win. So Esther makes teddy bears, hand-knit teddy bears. Caroline is very talented and makes face mask necklaces. And Michael was kind enough to offer to give 2 gift cards. So a lot of perks for joining our conferences. Not only do you get to have wonderful presentations and be in the LILi community, but opportunities to get raffle items as well. So please make sure that you fill out the evaluation and there will be information about the raffle in there. I also want to take this moment to thank you all as attendees for being part of the LILi community. I really would like to thank presenters for generously offering their time and expertise to talk about topics of information literacy related to today's theme, which was all about asking questions, unlearning, challenging power dynamics, and thinking about the different spaces where we relearn, unlearn, and how we learn, who we learn from, and so forth. So thank you so much. And lastly, I would like to just give a shout out to all of the LILi board members who make our time together possible to continue to talk about information literacy, to the web team for all the work that they do, because they provided us with such a wonderful website kind of virtual experience, and to all of the planning team who made this conference possible. It's a lot of work, but we do it because like we are, we're for the love of information literacy. So thank you so much for coming. And I just want to just say a couple thoughts too, that as Liz comes into the chair position and I exit the chair position, I hope that we're able to advocate more for colleagues who are unable to possibly attend our meetings and our conferences due to whatever restraints that they're encountering in their systems, or the lack of support that they have to get paid or to be a part of our conference and meetings. And I want to say that I hope that our community agreements get passed and used more widely at our board meetings and our conferences. And then I want to give a shout out to some mentors of mine. I want to thank Angela Boyd and Susie Chin and Annie Knight for giving me space and giving me love and support in this profession that sometimes is very isolating for a brown woman. And I just want to thank them because they told me about LILi. And lastly, I want to thank Suzanne M for always showing love and support to me. So thank you for joining us, and please do get involved in LILi, whether that be coming to meetings or on the board or through our conferences. So that's it. Have a beautiful day. Yeah, that's all. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to Eva for her leadership for the conference. I feel like the board and other members agree with me in the chat. And thank you to Liz, who's the incoming chair and will be leading us next year. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy your Friday. I am going to end the live stream and close the Zoom room. So please check out our website for presentations. We'll be posting people's content there. If you didn't catch things in the chat or you missed something stepping out for a bit, no worries. It'll all be on LILi website. And please, please, please fill out that feedback form and win some prizes. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Thank you, Eva.